OC. Viewer discretion is advised. Incoming transmission in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, it's Courtney here from the Outcasted OC Podcast, and welcome to the Monday Night Raw recap. You guys know I don't like to mess around with intros, so let's get straight into the show. Monday Night Raw this week kicked off with Cody Rhodes coming out to say a few words to the crowd as the show had started. He went ahead and said that he had been interrupted last week and for the last couple of weeks, and he's got one thing he really wants to talk about. He wants to talk about main event JEY. Dominic Mysterio comes out and interrupts him and goes ahead and says that the only thing that matters about JEY is that once he joins the Judgment Day, they will continue to dominate WWE. Speaking of dominating, Mami is not here. She is injured. I'll get into my theory a little bit about that later. So Dom goes ahead and says that Mami's not here because she's injured, but after I beat you, I'll be dedicating my win to Mami. Cody responds with, well, try and tell them what you said again, because obviously, as we know, Dominic Mysterio gets heavily booed whenever he tries to cut a promo. And Cody goes ahead and says, big night, huh? And says that will be what impresses Rhea enough for her to be able to finally define what you guys' relationship is. And he goes ahead and says that you're more into her than she is into you. And it seems like Mami has eyes for Jey Uso. And Dominic goes ahead and says, it's not like that at all. And he says that we're a family and says that Judgment Day is a family and that Jey Uso will learn when he does join Judgment Day. And then this kind of sets up the match that Cody and Dom have. It was referenced on Instagram earlier in the day before Monday Night Raw started that Cody and Dom will be having a match. So Judgment Day music hits, they come out, so Finn and Damien are sitting ringside for this match. So the match between Dom Mysterio and Cody Rhodes starts. Now before the match actually gets a chance to start, we see that Dragon Lee from NXT is actually standing ringside for this match. Now they do have a match next week on Monday Night Raw between Dragon Lee and Dirty Dom. I'm really excited for this. This will be super cool to see Dragon Lee on the main roster in terms of actually getting a match on one of the main roster shows. But anyway, match starts off with Cody Rhodes hitting Dominic Mysterio with a vertical suplex, which is then followed by a figure 4 leg lock. Cody's hitting Dominic Mysterio with a bunch of chops, and then Finn Balor interferes in the match, so he ends up knocking Cody off the top rope by the ring apron. Then Dominic Mysterio goes for the 3 amigos, which, Cody has a pretty nasty landing coming out of the second amigo. Then Cody hits a Cody cutter, which is followed by a crossroads. Cody Rhodes comes away with the win. The match is quite short, but at the very end, Judgment Day stands on the ring apron on one side whilst Cody is in the ring. And then we hear Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn's music's hit. So they come out and they come and stand with Cody, obviously a 3-on-3 kind of style like we've seen before. Then the Judgment Day ends up leaving the arena. As we see Cody walk away, Kevin Owens is still standing in the middle of the ring and he goes, hey, before you leave, I kind of want to have you come back here. I need to talk to you about a few things. He's basically just saying, let's have a chat. So we get to a commercial break, and once we come back from the commercial break, Kevin Owens is like, I'm glad that we're back on the air because I actually have something I really want to talk about. And he goes ahead and says, Cody, Jey Uso's on Monday Night Raw because of you. Is that correct? And Cody says, that's correct. Now keep in mind, Sami Zayn is also present in this moment as well too, so you can imagine how Sami Zayn is feeling during this interaction. And Kevin Owens goes ahead and says, we don't need to spill any details about Jey Uso and the pain and conflict that he has caused because we all know, we're all well aware of what's happened. But why did you bring him to Monday Night Raw? And Cody said, lots of people do need to hear it, and, the locker room is really upset, but the crowd knows why that Jey Uso is back on Monday Night Raw. And he said that our job is to make people happy, right? And he said he's had plenty of second chances, and it's time to finally show change, especially from Jay's perspective. It's time for Jey to finally show that he's changed and stepped away from the bloodline. The bloodline is familiar. We're all familiar with the bloodline, and now they're actually down a member because, Jey Uso has now moved over to Monday Night Raw from SmackDown. And Sami says, look, I don't want to interrupt. I totally know how you're feeling right now, Kevin, but I've got a few things I want to say too. And Sami goes ahead and says, I've had your back since day one, and I know that you do take more time to trust people and warm up to people. But I know Jay, and I know the situation that he's had to deal with. And he then follows with, you should give him a second chance. You've given me second chances, I've given you second chances. And goes ahead and then says, WrestleMania didn't happen without a second chance being given between the two of us. And Kevin then starts going and saying, well, do you want me to pretend that Jey Uso didn't screw you over when it came to the Universal Championship at Elimination Chamber, Sammy? Do you want me to just forget that he also didn't screw you over when it came to your WrestleMania match, Cody? And goes ahead and said, he screwed over all of us. Kevin then goes ahead and says, do you want me to trust Jey Uso? Because I can't do that. I trust you both, and I trust that you make the right decision, and that I hope you're right, and then walks off. So it's very interesting to see that Cody and Sammy are more of the belief that we should trust Jey Uso and give him a second chance, where Kevin Owens is like, no. Now, I feel like this almost furthers the theory that Kevin Owens might have enough of this situation and be the one being drafted to SmackDown. We still don't know who that Raw superstar is that is being drafted to SmackDown, so it'll be interesting to see if anything continues to happen in terms of Kevin Owens being upset by Jey Uso's presence so much that he jumps over to SmackDown. Then we see a video recap segment from the match that happened between Rhea Ripley and Raquel Rodriguez. This was the main event match that happened last week on Monday Night Raw, with the very rude interference from Nia Jax. Then we end up seeing that Michael Cole and Wade Barrett are just having a chat about the match, and Michael Cole goes ahead and says that both Raquel and Rhea are both injured. I know fully well that Rhea's injury is not true. She's in Australia right now. She's potentially going to be the one to announce the Australian Premium Live event. Now, sorry in advance if I reference this a bit too much. I'm just very excited that this is potentially going to be announced tomorrow from when I'm filming this. I know that she's in Australia with Buddy. So I know that her storyline injury is obviously just to keep it under wraps that something's happening. But I'm interested to see what's going on with Raquel, because they mentioned something about bruised ribs and everything, and I'm kind of like, oh, okay, so it's to make Nia look a little bit better. Anyway, we have a match that is then followed. So we have Kofi Kingston going up against Ivar. Now, I believe that was supposed to be a tag team match with the New Day and the Viking Raiders, but the New Day met up with Adam Pearce earlier and some news happened, ended up having the match being cancelled, and then Kofi and Xavier did rock, paper, scissors to see who was going to go up against Ivar. Anyway, so that's how we got Kofi and Ivar. Very interesting how we get these matches these days, but nonetheless, I recommend you see this match. If you have not watched it, it is a very good match. From the very beginning, Ivar is getting a lot of offense in, hits Kofi with a really nice shoulder tackle. Beautiful sequence then follows from Kofi Kingston. And Ivar does a top rope move, which is then followed by Kofi hitting him with a really big kick. Ivar splashes off the ring apron onto the floor, so Kofi's lying on the ground outside, and Ivar then hits Kofi with it's like a splash. Then after the commercial break, we see that Ivar is dominating Kofi. And then Ivar ends up hitting Kofi with a flying crossbody, which then Kofi ends up hitting Ivar with a crossbody as well. Ivar hits Kofi with a few big boots, and then Kofi ends up hitting an SOS, but then we end up getting a 2 count on it, so he's kind of kicked out of it. We get a boom drop by Kofi, which is then followed by a butterfly powerbomb by Ivar. Ivar crushes Kofi in a moonsault. Kofi kicks out though, which is very interesting. To see a big man like Ivar hitting a moonsault and Kofi still kicking out of it is just wild. Kofi kicks Ivar with a Trouble in Paradise, and that's how he comes away with the win in this match. As I said, I highly recommend you see this match. It was very good. Then we see a video recap segment from last week with Seth Rollins and Shinsuke Nakamura. Now Shinsuke is playing a lot of mind games with Seth Rollins. Seth is willing to give Shinsuke a rematch for the World Heavyweight Championship, but Shinsuke doesn't really want to do it on Seth's time. He wants to do it on his own time. Then we see that Jackie Redmond was backstage having a quick conversation with Ricochet before his match against Shinsuke Nakamura. And Ricochet is basically saying that, he's not going to be a mind game for Seth Rollins and he's not a pawn. And Shinsuke Nakamura attacked him, but it's got me more fired up than ever. And he goes ahead and says, let's play I'm the cheat code because it'll be game over. After that backstage segment, we then have the match between Shinsuke Nakamura and Ricochet. Now, before this match even starts, we see Seth Rollins is trying to sit ringside for this match, obviously to get in Shinsuke Nakamura's head. But then we see security and Adam Pearce running out, trying to stop a potential brawl between Shinsuke and Seth Rollins. We then have the match. So Ricochet from the very beginning is going very hard in on Shinsuke Nakamura, obviously to get revenge from the attack that happened last week. This is followed by some cheap shots and some kicks from Shinsuke Nakamura to Ricochet. We have a beautiful sequence coming in from Ricochet, which is then followed by a sliding drop kick from Shinsuke to Ricochet. Shinsuke hits a running knee and ends up kicking Ricochet with a couple of quick strikes as well too. Ricochet follows up with a springboard and a step up enziguri as well too. They make their way outside of the ring, and then we can see that Ricochet is on the ground and Shinsuke can kind of see a chair sitting on the other side of the barricade. So he goes to grab it, but then he hits it and no one sees that he's hit Ricochet with the chair. Chair ends up on the ground, and then Ricochet, obviously Shinsuke Nakamura has gotten in his head enough to the point where Ricochet grabs the chair and hits Shinsuke Nakamura with it, causing a disqualification win for Shinsuke. After the match, we see Shinsuke Nakamura continuing to target Ricochet's ankle, and he ends up hitting Ricochet with a Kinshasa as well too. Seth Rollins makes his way through the crowd and he ends up brawling with Shinsuke Nakamura, which this doesn't work well in Seth Rollins' favour because Shinsuke starts to target Seth's back a little bit more. So he ends up hitting him with a backdrop on the chair in the middle of the ring and ends up throwing him back first into the commentary table as well. So we're still seeing a lot of this playthrough of Seth Rollins' back injury and Shinsuke capitalizing off of it. Then we see a video recap of Seth Rollins walking backstage. He's really struggling to kind of move and ends up getting taken into medical. This is then followed by a video recap of the match between Shayna Baszler and Chelsea Green from last week, which was where we saw Piper Niven getting involved with Shayna and then Zoe coming in. Byron Saxton is catching up with Chelsea Green and Piper Niven backstage, and he's asking about this new form alliance between Zoe Stark and Shayna Baszler. Chelsea goes ahead and says that Shayna and Zoe aren't even a real team because what makes a team is friendship. And Piper goes ahead and says, "Are we friends?" And then Chelsea's like, "Yeah, man, we're besties." And then Piper's like, "Well, if we're friends, where am I from?" And I think the best thing to come out of this segment is the fact that Chelsea was saying England, Ireland, and then she goes ahead and says that Piper is from Florida. So not only did she get the country wrong, but she thinks that Florida is a country. So then Piper walks off and Chelsea's kind of like, "Oh, I'm sorry, like I know it's Scotland, like I said it wrong, like I'm really sorry." Then we have the tag team match between the four women. Now this starts off with Zoe and Chelsea both in the ring. Chelsea's hit with a really nice springboard senton, which is coming from Zoe Stark. Then we see Shayna Baszler come in and she ends up hitting a backbreaker onto Chelsea. This is then followed by Shayna hitting a running knee on Chelsea and closely followed by a missile drop kick from Chelsea to Zoe. We end up seeing Piper Niven coming in and hitting a shoulder breaker onto Zoe Stark. The champs end up double teaming Zoe, which then Chelsea ends up hitting a step up enziguri to Zoe Stark as well too. Then we see Shayna going after Piper. Now Piper ends up slamming Shayna outside of the ring, which we end up seeing Nia Jax coming in and attacking not only Piper Niven, but attacking Chelsea Green and Shayna Baszler. I don't know why I thought of Sonya. She probably attacked her in the background too, to be perfectly honest. So Nia ends up hitting a Samoan drop and a senton on Zoe and ends up throwing Chelsea Green and then attacking Shayna by hitting an Annihilator on Shayna. I'm really confused with how they're trying to do this because I think what ended up happening here is Nia coming in and actually ruining the match for four people didn't help Nia look that great, but also it did not make the other four women look good, like at all. I have no idea. And then as Nia's leaving, she goes ahead and says that it's open season and that she is putting the women's division on notice. So it'll be very interesting to see what's going to happen there. Then we see a backstage segment where Adam Pearce is on the phone. Chad Gable comes in asking for another shot at Gunther. Adam Pearce goes ahead and he's like, "Well, I can't really put you in another spot with Gunther. You know, you've already lost a couple of times. It's time to let somebody else have a go." And then we see Bronson Reed coming in and he ends up trying to get on Chad Gable's nerves. And they end up setting a match between the two of them up for later on in the evening. We end up seeing Jackie Redmond backstage and she's chatting with main event Jey Uso, and she basically just asks, you know, about the hostility with him and Kevin Owens and as well as him and Drew McIntyre. And Jay goes ahead and says, you know, it's all good. I've got a target on my back because of the history that we have. It's totally fine. And then we see Damian Priest come in. And he said, like, hey, I hope you're all good, man. Look, I just wanted to ask you for a favor. The rest of Judgment Day really wants Jimmy in the faction, but I really want main event Jey Uso. Now, this is not a dictatorship. We are a family. And Jey Uso responds with, I know all about family. And then Damien says, well, I know that you know all about your bloodline, but what we have is special. And he said that all he asks for is a straight up yes or no answer by the end of the night, and says, do not make me look bad in front of my family. Then we have the match between Bronson Reed and Chad Gable. Now, from the very beginning, Bronson Reed is entering this match with a lot of power, and Chad is coming in with a lot of quickness. I feel like the whole story of this match is, you can't suplex me, I can suplex you. We end up seeing a missile drop kick coming in from Chad Gable, but it doesn't end up being strong enough to knock Bronson Reed down. Bronson Reed ends up hitting Chad Gable with a power slam. Then Bronson ends up following up by throwing Chad Gable not only into one turnbuckle, but two, and throws him into one of the top ring posts. Chad Gable goes for his armbar on Bronson over the top ring rope, and then Chad ends up countering this with a splash onto Bronson. Bronson goes for a running swanton. Chad gets his knees up and then goes for the German suplex, but Bronson ends up hitting Chad Gable with a back slam and goes for the tsunami and comes away with the win. Very interesting to see how this match went. I'm liking the fact that Bronson Reed is getting some wins, but I'm not really too sure why it needs to be at the expense of Chad Gable. Then we see a promo segment coming in from Tommaso Ciampa. Now, Tommaso Ciampa has said from the very beginning of his stint on the main roster, he has been more of an observer. He likes to play the long game, and there's been a lot of waiting since he's been on the main roster, and said he's finally had enough, and that patience is not a virtue in life, it is a crutch. And there's sometimes you have to create your own opportunities. And he said he is going to make Giovanni Vinci tap again tonight, and then he's going to make Ludwig Kaiser tap again. And he said that Imperium didn't choose him, he chose Imperium to go up against. And he says, Gunther, you have what I want, and then throws his chair and walks away. So I think it is safe to say that Tommaso Ciampa is going after Gunther and the IC title. I cannot wait. I feel like the match is just going to be an absolute banger. Then we had a video recap segment. Now, this showed the match between Tiffany Stratton and Becky Lynch for the NXT Women's Championship, which happened last week. We end up seeing Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn arguing backstage about Jey Uso, and obviously going into more detail about the conversation they had earlier in the night. Then we see Jey Uso coming in, and he goes ahead and says, Kevin, if you've got something to say, I think you need to just say it. And Kevin Owens starts just going absolutely crazy, and he starts going off on Jey Uso, and he basically goes ahead and says that he thinks that Jey Uso is working with the Judgment Day because of the fact that Kevin Owens got hit by Jey last week and it was an accident. So there's a little bit of miscommunication and confusion going on there, but you can just see Sami Zayn in the background, honestly, just trying to keep the peace, and I swear that is just me naturally. Then we see Becky Lynch comes out to the ring. Now she goes ahead and starts saying how, the man is the new NXT champion, and she's learnt that you have to take chances and opportunities when they come about, and she's now obviously a Grand Slam champion because of it. And she says that she doesn't want to just leave the title on her mantle to show off to everybody. She wants to elevate the title, and that NXT is for the future, and it is where people come in and they have so much hope and hunger and aspirations and wanting to be better, and it is where they progress. And she goes ahead and she says that she wants to test herself against the future. So she is going to be defending the NXT Women's Championship on NXT, but she's decided to issue an open challenge to defend the title on Monday Night Raw. So she obviously wants somebody from NXT or an up-and-coming star to basically answer the challenge for a match. And who else do we see other than Natalya? And I was kind of like, really? So Natalya goes on and she basically starts talking about opportunity and how she's been here for a very long time, and she's been waiting in catering, she's been waiting out the back, and she's been waiting for her shot, and she never gets any opportunities. Becky goes ahead and says, look, I have immense respect for you. We've been working together for a long time. We've been wrestling. We wrestled in Japan together 15 odd years ago. But I honestly thought that somebody new would come in. You're a veteran, you've had a lot of time in the spotlight. I kind of was hoping for somebody new. And Natalya goes ahead and says, 15 years of waiting, and I've been waiting a very long time for these moments. And you just went into NXT and you walked all over everybody to get that championship, and goes ahead and calls Becky Lynch a hypocritical ginger witch. Which I was kind of like, Absolutely no need for that disrespect. But Becky's like, let's go ahead and have this match. So we have a really quick match between Natalya and Becky Lynch. Becky has an exploder coming out of the gate in this match on Natalya. Becky then goes for the manhandle slam, which Natty ends up countering into the sharpshooter. Becky's able to reverse this and goes on to the top and then up to the top rope, and then Natalya matches her there. Then we see that Natty goes for a superplex on Becky, and then Natty tries to go for the sharpshooter a couple of times during this match, which I honestly started to feel as though that was the only move she was really pulling out. But then Becky ends up throwing Natalya into the corner and she hits Natty with a missile drop kick, which looked really good, and ends up hitting her with a baseball slide outside of the ring and goes for the armbar, which Natty ends up reversing and does. They do like a couple of roll throughs together where Natty's on top of Becky, Becky's on top of Natty, and then I think Becky ends up getting away with the win. So Becky Lynch has won the match. It was a very short match. Did not look good for Natalya. I don't really know where she goes from here, but to be honest, I don't really... You guys know how I feel about Natty. I don't really have much to say, other than I can respect the work she's done, but I just don't really think she's a credible threat for the title. Then we see that Adam Pearce and Dragon Lee are chatting backstage, and then Dominic Mysterio comes in and starts going off on Adam Pearce for not punishing Nia Jax for Rhea's absence and obviously for her injuries that Nia had caused. Then Dominic Mysterio looks at Dragon Lee and goes ahead and says, I hate people with masks because masks remind me of my deadbeat dad. And they end up just having a bit of a tiff together, which sets up that match that they're having next week on Monday Night Raw. We had a really quick match between Giovanni Vinci and Tommaso Ciampa. Now this is obviously in continuation from Tommaso's promo from earlier in the night. From the very beginning of the match, Ludwig is trying to interfere, but then Giovanni goes in really hard on Tommaso with some uppercuts, which then he follows with a really nice clothesline to Tommaso. Tommaso ends up picking up the pace and ends up dropping Giovanni. I was going to say Gunther. Not yet, Courtney. That will happen eventually. Then we see that Ludwig is still trying to interfere, and then we end up seeing a roll-up by Giovanni, which is unsuccessful. Tommaso ends up catching Giovanni with his knee and ends up putting Giovanni into the Sicilian stretch, which then Giovanni ends up tapping out to. So Tommaso Ciampa comes away with the win. We're potentially going to see a match between Ludwig and Tommaso next week. But as the match was ending, Ludwig was screaming at Giovanni because he looked really angry with what was going on. Then we see Byron Saxton's backstage and he's catching up with Seth Rollins quickly before the end of the night. And he goes ahead and says, Seth, we saw what happened earlier on in the night. How are you feeling? And Seth goes ahead and says that he's tired and he's in a lot of pain and he's been trying to keep it together, but he feels like he's going to lose his mind. And he goes ahead and says, Shinsuke, the ball is now in your court. Name the time, the place, and the stipulation if you please. And asks, will you define your legacy or will it be me defining your legacy? So I have a feeling that this match is going to be set up between the two of them for Fastlane. That's the next premium live event that we will be seeing in the next couple of weeks. So that'll be very interesting to see. Then we had a video package which was showing a lot of the history between Jey Uso and Drew McIntyre. Obviously a lot of things that have been happening from the past. So the bloodline very much interfering in a lot of Drew's business, which is causing Drew to lose a lot, which is then followed by the match between the two. So Drew from the beginning is on the attack, but then Jey ends up finding a way to fight back. Drew hits Jey with a shoulder barge, which then Drew does this move in the corner of the ring where he ends up ripping Jey Uso's shirt off to then hit him with some chops. But then Jey ends up hitting Drew with a nice right hand, which is then followed by Drew McIntyre suplexing Jey Uso. We end up seeing the both of them trading blows, and then Jey ends up jumping through the ropes twice, doing some suicide dives onto Drew McIntyre. And then the Judgment Day end up coming out. So it kind of makes it look like the Judgment Day are there to see where Jey Uso's alliance is. After the commercial break, Drew McIntyre is on the attack and ends up hitting Jey with a really nice superplex. Jey ends up hitting a really good enziguri onto Drew and then follows that by a really nice Samoan drop as well. Jey goes for a dive, but then Drew ends up catching it and hits Jey with a nice spinebuster jackknife combo, followed by a really good kip up as well too, and then is followed by a neck breaker. Drew ends up setting up the Claymore, but then the Judgment Day ends up distracting, and then Jey Uso can capitalize off that, hitting a really nice super kick. Then we end up seeing that He's in the corner, so Jey Uso's in the corner of the ring, and what ends up happening is Judgment Day are very much trying to get in his ear and are trying to tell him what to do. But then we see Jey Uso kind of snap and hits all three of the Judgment Day members, so Dom, Damien, and Finn, with super kicks, which then Drew ends up finding a way to hit the Claymore and get the 3 count, so Drew McIntyre is the winner of this match. At the very end, we see the Judgment Day attacking Jey Uso, and as Drew McIntyre is leaving, he looks really conflicted if he wants to go back and help, but then we end up seeing Cody Rhodes making the save in this match. Now, that was the end. I really enjoyed the main event match. It kind of told the story between Jey and Drew and their issues that they've had in the past, as well as the looming tension of will Jey Uso join Judgment Day. So unfortunately, Jey Uso will not be joining Judgment Day. I think this is a really good call because you can kind of see from Jey leaving the bloodline, he's very much trying to step out on his own and be the main event Jey Uso that we know. But yeah, if you guys made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for watching. That is the Monday Night Raw recap for this week. I hope you guys enjoyed. It was a pretty good episode in my opinion. There were a few moments where it kind of dragged on a little bit, but Monday Night Raw can be like that sometimes. If you liked the video, please make sure you go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe to the YouTube channel because that helps to push our videos out into the algorithm to find wrestling fans like you to come and listen to us talk about wrestling. Now this week we will be having an NXT review coming in from Reese, which will then be followed by the podcast on Thursday. We will be talking about the PWI 500 list, how we feel about it, and kind of give our opinions on the 2023 list. We'll be having a SmackDown review coming in from G and potentially an AEW review at some point from Ross. But yeah, I hope you guys liked the video. Make sure you go ahead and follow all of our personal social medias down below, as well as the Outcasted TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, so you can keep up to date with any of our new posts. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye guys.